Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast. I'm David Higgins. It is so exciting to have you with us in this conversation. Today's conversation is going to be amazing. If there ever is a conversation where you want a pen and paper close by, or you want to listen to a second time, this one just might be it, because we're going to talk to a really special guest, and he is really somebody, as I dove into who he is and the products and all of his team that's around him, what they're putting out. It's a very, very high quality. Also of high quality is the book that we're going to be, that's sponsoring this particular episode. It is by yours truly, but it's Demystifying Fundraising Funnels. It is a digital marketing blueprint to fund your nonprofit. And especially if you are a small, medium-sized nonprofit and you're saying, David, how do we start communicating online with our funding? Why should we do it? And what tools are out there to do it? This is a great book for you to read, to look at, and also can really be a language that'll bring your team and your board together so you guys can have the same conversation about the same subject. I've been there before, sitting in a boardroom and you're trying to say something and everyone's on a different page, and you say a word or a definition and everyone has a different conclusion of what that is. Well, this is a book that's going to allow you to be able to have the same conversations and be able to move from even beyond the book into other thoughts and processes where you're all on the same page. So I highly recommend you picking up Demystifying Fundraising Funnels wherever books are sold, as well as Audible and on ebooks. So today's conversation is amazing. And I have been very excited ever since we were able to book this particular guest to be able to have this conversation with him. We're going to be actually asking some really specific questions that are about, what are the best tools? What are some of the best ideas? How do we implement? And this is a man who has done it over and over and over again with nonprofit after nonprofit. For over 30 years, Bob Swaney has been a leader in achieving superior contributed revenue results for the arts. After serving as a staff member in progressive fundraising positions with Indianapolis, Chicago, and St. Louis's Symphony orchestras, Bob shifted his focus and in 2006 launched his own consulting firm, which is Robert Swaney Consulting. And we're going to call it RSC. They also call it RSC. So it is dedicated to assisting the nation's arts and cultural institutions in dramatically improving their fundraising positions. Now, this is an exciting conversation that I get a lot of questions and texts and emails. David, we want more fundraising ideas and thoughts. So this interview has a lot to do with questions you have been asking. So let's welcome the founder and CEO at Robert Swaney Consulting. Bob, it is great to have you a part of our podcast.
Thank you, David. Really glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Did
you hear the applause as I announced you?
I heard. I heard you push the button that said applause.
Somebody's been in our editing booth. All right. Well, now I have to get an applause button and actually push it in the editing booth. Absolutely. So you're from Hoosierville. You're an Indiana guy.
I am. Born and raised in Indiana, did the Midwestern tour with a couple of big orchestras, came back to Indiana when we started raising our family, and have been here now for 20 some odd years at this point. So it's great. It's great to be back. It's a nice place to home base from for the kind of work that we do nationally. And so really enjoy it.
Oh, that's fantastic. I grew up on a piano. I grew up in orchestra and music. The first time I was playing with a group was 13 years of age in a room full of amazing musicians. I happened to be the kid on the stage. It had some wonderful talent and beautiful people in that crowd. But my dad did not want me just to be the guy who's sitting behind a piano. So when I was a junior in high school, he had me be a part of the basketball team at the high school. And so my basketball coach made me, as part of my homework, watch Hoosiers. So I have a question from artist to artist. Have you ever played basketball, being from Indiana?
No, I did. I am one of the rare breed who is not a huge basketball fan, never played basketball, play the occasional game of horse with my son. That's about it.
Excellent. Well, I think that that particular movie certainly put everybody from Indiana into a particular box that is maybe not be realistic.
Probably that's true, and we're more than corn, obviously, in Indiana, but vibrant arts communities, some really good performing arts, beautiful, wonderful museums, and I'm based right here in Indianapolis, and so this is pretty much the heart of those kind of offerings. So yeah, we really enjoy it. It's a lot more than just the things that you see in the movies.
That's awesome. Well, before becoming a fundraising specialist, you spent 5 years as an assistant vice president of development and marketing at Indianapolis's Symphony Orchestra. What was it like to be in that kind of an environment?
Well, it drove me to consulting. So now here's what I'll say. And as we get started, David, I'll say, I know a lot of the folks who might be listening to this won't necessarily be working for arts nonprofits. We'll talk about things though, and just translate it into what you're doing. We'll stick with fundamentals. My company's a fundamental type company. We work with that kind of stuff. And so to go back to your question, one of the things that I learned a lot and learned very well repeatedly was that because of the small patron base in an arts organization, even a big one like the Symphony in Indianapolis, we have to share patrons between donors and ticket buyers. And so this idea of saying, making fundraising and marketing in a place like that work really well together, and to have cooperative messaging and to have cooperative timing, using segmentations wisely, those things are important in the fact that then you are really truly complementary and not competing in any way. And because when we started competing, we started confusing patrons, and when we confuse patrons, we lose money and we lose patrons. And so that was sort of the cornerstone of saying, okay, listen, how do we get this in a nice rhythm, for lack of a better word, but a nice rhythm between marketing development, so that the patrons never feel overwhelmed, they're never confused, it makes sense to them, feels like one organization, that sort of thing. So that was a pretty big lesson that I learned working for that. And it supplied a lot of when I went out to work as a consultant full time, to be sure that we didn't just think in a vacuum about it only being fundraising, only being donations, that we would look at it in such a way that we have to remember that the patron most often is first a consumer. They come to concerts and they might come to education offerings, they might come to different events, and then eventually they become donors. It's rarely the other way around. So I've always been careful about timing that and coordinating that appropriately. And I usually give the marketing folks first swing at things, because we know that we need them and they know they need us.
It really is hand in hand. Well, in some sectors, though, within the nonprofit landscape, fundraising, actually, I should say many sectors, fundraising has been really difficult. I know you've seen some organizations really break through some of these barriers that really society, economically, politically, we've been in turmoil for the last 2+ years. Can you share some of the stories that you've seen a real breakthrough that's really tangible for our listeners?
Yeah, and I can move away from the arts a little bit, because we work with other organizations. I volunteer at other organizations, and so that here's the 2 points of consistency that I see that help break through that. A is to have strong leadership. So strong leadership on the board. If there's a management team, having strong leadership with the management team. And so that they have focus and intention and deliberation on how to move forward in fundraising. The second thing is that the story on how to ask is most often outward facing. And it's tough, I know, with some organizations, because they're such a needs-based organization. What they do as part of their mission is needs-based, and so their fundraising quickly translates into that. But needs-based fundraising to us is really not a positive way to move forward. We like to focus messaging on value, not need. And so the organizations that are working on value-based, like really value-based messaging of who we are, what we do, why we do it, who it impacts, what the value is, who pays for it, that starting to give that really rounded message is a way then for success. It creates listening. And whereas need doesn't necessarily create listening, but value usually piques interest and can begin to develop a relationship, and really can. So I've seen that happen, especially with things like food banks, really, really good publicization on how they are, what they're doing and how they're doing it, why they're doing it, and then begin to talk about what their stories are, that becomes part of the fundraising case. So I've seen, for instance, and this is an old colleague, but I think it's the Northwest in Chicago, the food bank that's there. And the woman who's running the place used to be a colleague of mine at the Chicago Symphony. And she's doing a fantastic job there. And their messaging was even tied into national level advertising because they had a partnership with Walmart. And so when I think about it, that's a fantastic example, though, probably an extreme example, but a fantastic example of really when you put your message out there and you do it in a way that I call turning the mirror outwards and seeing how your organization reflects within a community rather than looking in the mirror and trying to describe yourself all the time. It's a huge difference, and it's mentally a minor shift intellectually, but once you get there, it's very powerful, very powerful. So those are the kinds of organizations that I see in health and human services that over and over again can have that kind of an impact, and what they're doing really, really well now.
You mentioned food banks, which I have a real passion for the nonprofits that really are fighting for the most vulnerable parts of our society. And about a year and a half ago, I started working as a consultant for a food bank, helping them break through. They were in trouble financially. They had lost some grants. And as a result, they only understood tactile fundraising. And I said, okay, we need to get your fundraising online. And to support that, I had my team do a bunch of researching on food banks. I found out something absolutely shocking. And from the merge from 2019 to 2020, by the time we got to the beginning of 2021, nonprofits, specifically food banks that had taken their fundraising online, didn't mean that they didn't stop applying for grants, but they took their fundraising online. They grew their income by 156% in 14 months. Yeah. And nationally. And then for those that did not and only maintained their grants and their own tactile fundraising, they were losing money at probably 10 to 15% per annum. And it was a scary statistic of where the economy is shifting, where communication is shifting as a nation, as a society. And it comes down to, as nonprofits, we have to constantly be learning. And that's something you talk about. You always talk about you're always learning. And, I know your learning had a huge part at University of Evansville, where you got your degree. By the way, I checked out the campus. It's a beautiful campus. That is absolutely a beautiful place.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my time. Met my wife there, so no complaints. That's delightful. And we still have family in Evansville, so it's a delightful community, great campus.
That sounds like a win-win. But taking that off the table, where have you learned your best lessons when you keep helping struggling nonprofits and turning them around? You're saying learning is so important. Where can we find our best lessons?
Well, I'll tell you where I found some of mine. When I started in my career, this was a long, seriously, 34 or 5 years ago at this point. I started as a telemarketing room manager, and literally my room was underneath the sidewalk in the basement. And so when you talk about boiler rooms in the 80s, I wore that proudly. And so what I learned there was I hired dozens and dozens and dozens of people. We talked to thousands of people every year for telemarketing and telefundraising. What I learned that of value there was that everyone has a story, and the reasons why someone would come do the work that we were engaging them to do, make calls for 4 hours a night every night with the rejection and all that, regardless of what you think about telemarketing these days. But those were, that's a tough job, even back in the glory days of high volume calls. That's tough enough, but people did that. They came in for a very specific reason, and sometimes it was the money, but oftentimes it was other things. And the same with the patrons, to begin to build relationships with patrons and find out why they come to the performances and why they do the things that they do and how often they come and what it means to them. They each have really different stories. And uniquely, by themselves, those stories are important. But when you begin to put those together as a community of stories, that's how we have real cohesive power in terms of a community of donors, a community of concert goers, a community of people who they might like. And I say this sometimes to our clients, they start by liking what you do, but they end up loving who you are. And when they love who you are as an organization, it's because of those kinds of stories. And that's when they'll feel very generous. It's when they'll be a part of things and get pulled into the story themselves. And so I like that feeling of community that's created through stories. And so that one's always been an important one to me. I think the other part is I've been on several boards in my career too. And so having kind of living on the other side, what I found there was no matter what people think, and no matter how much you think you know about an institution, when you get on the board, you know virtually nothing. And so when I overlay that with the idea that one of the main things we do with a board is ask them to fundraise, I understand why it's such a challenge, because I've had that firsthand, like, I don't know what to say, or I don't know who to talk to, and so that whole idea, it can be a little bit overwhelming on the board side. So what I've learned as a coach, which is how we view our consultants, we're coaches, how we approach that kind of coaching is we know that there's a technical sort of approach to getting board members engaged, but we also know there's a psychological approach to getting them engaged. And we try to spend ample time on both. Different board members do different things and are different levels of comfort, but we have to get them swept into that if we want them to be, happy and productive and feel like their time's well spent and they feel good about it and there's value to it. So almost, those are the kinds of things I look for. And so that's sort of a wide swath between, when I came in as a newbie and managed phone rooms, and really now at very high levels of helping manage volunteers and coach and train them. So those are a couple of really quick examples, though.
I was spending some time in my 30s on boards. It feels like I've been on boards almost my whole adult life, but I remember the first time I came into a boardroom that was very congested with opposing ideas. And over a period of a year, I came on as, I think I was the secretary of the board in that particular setting. By the end of that year, I was on 5 boards. And how did I get on the 5 boards of 5 nonprofits? And I turned to Michelle and I said, what do I do? And my wife looked at me and goes, well, you're still running your own nonprofit, which at that time we were doing things internationally and we were traveling. And she goes, why don't you do different positions on each board and just make it a little more fun? And so by the time I was 36 years of age, I was sitting on 6 boards, and I was president of one, vice president of another, secretary, treasurer, and 2 trustee positions. And it was actually quite an educational process, to be honest with you. You have been known to find solutions. You are a solutions guy, and finding solutions in very difficult positions is actually something you've become skilled at by everything I'm reading and comments that others have made. Can you give me a multi-step approach a nonprofits, specifically smaller nonprofits, can take to re-envision their funding and financial futures?
Yeah, it's a good question. I get it a lot. This will sound really rudimentary, but the first thing I say is don't overcomplicate it. We've got to keep this simple. Successful fundraising is the act of a handful of repetitions in terms of taking action, analyzing what happened, making adjustments, and then moving forward with the next action. And so I think about it more in terms of cycles than I do in terms of just exact steps. What can you do? Most organizations are slightly different. They're slightly different spots. But what I have found is that most organizations lack fundamentals in fundraising. So if you have a handful of things, if you've got, you need the leadership, mentioned that before, you have to have strong board leaderships. And if you have strong staff leadership, you have to have good data. And if you don't have good data, get good data. because you need to have people to cultivate and ask. You definitely need a good case, and sort of that mirror facing outward casing that I mentioned. So that value-based discussion about what do we do and how do we do it and what's that value, and moving through that process, then of really identifying what value do you bring to the community? How do you align with the community's needs? How do you do it in a unique way? So that there's that kind of an exercise to really polish up that messaging, so that everybody's saying the same thing, and what they're saying is really, really good. And then the erring on the side of asking, getting particularly board members to ask is, I understand what a difficult task that is. And even staff members sometimes, and even staff members who are equipped as development directors, sometimes it's hard to get them out of planning and tactician mode and get them out and ask for support. And so I understand that, but the idea is, the biggest condition that we've got to move towards asking for more support, and doing it in a personal way at the high end, and doing it in a very broad-based way like you've described, either using direct mail, some combination of that with emailing and newsletters and Facebook and social media. And if you're doing auctions, you utilize that. And then the last part, and this is the one that most people forget, and that is the stewardship portion. How do you keep the donors? We talk a lot in our client base about it's hard enough to get the donors, but if you don't work to keep them, there was almost no reason to get them in the first place. The investment of time and energy and resources and research and all, and to get somebody to give you $500 for 1 year and then not have a plan on how to build a real relationship with them to retain that, it is probably foolish to not have that component. So those are some of the fundamentals, and I guess some other things that we would look at is, we're big on urgency. We don't think the days are equal. The mistake people make about an annual fund, for instance, is, well, you've got 365 days to do it. And while that's true, the days aren't equal. The first days are much more valuable. and
Absolutely
so,
true.
Right. And so we tell our clients, we need you to get to 70% of your goal, sometimes 65, depending on, but 65 to 70% of your goal within the first 6 months of your fiscal year. And the reason is because the way that we front load it with renewals and, renewing donors and lapsed donors and potential big donors, that by the time you get into the next 6 months, you need more time to cultivate the donor relationships that will trigger the balance of meeting your goal. And so it's really intense, really compressed on the front end. And then we go more into much higher cultivation mode on the back end, and we move heavily into stewardship mode for those donors we got in the first half of the fiscal year. And so it is regimented like that. So, we try to keep it easy, and we try to keep it simple, because we know with these organizations, fundraising is not easy. It'll never be an easy job to do. So the best we can do is keep it simple, keep it cyclical, repeat the same steps over and over again, get predictable results. Those are some of the things that we look for.
Oh, this is gold. Bob, thank you so much.
Of course.
All right, let me go through this one more time. Data, number one. Number two, making a case. I spend 2 chapters in Demystifying Fundraising Funnels talking about value and how to find your value and being able to make that case. But that was so concise. Then err on the side of asking and asking and asking, finding multiple ways to ask the same question. That's right. Brilliant. And then stewardship, which you're the first person who's given it a percentage. Now, I know it's something that should be innate to us understanding, but if we're spending the front end, instead of waiting to make, Black Friday through to the end of the year and make all of our money from Giving Tuesday on, like a business, we front load the giving, and we can work on stewardship and allow that Giving Tuesday push through Christmas to be the bonus. It's a brilliant strategy. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure. And here's the other thing I'll say about it. We don't subscribe to the idea that every board member in an organization, in a nonprofit, is going to be an asker. In fact, most board members will not be involved in the act of fundraising, but most of them, if not all of them, can be involved in the process of fundraising, identifying people who might donate, and stewarding those people once they do donate. So that larger group of board members are the ones who help you keep donors. And it's a smaller cadre, maybe 4 or 5 board members who are helping, if there's a staff, helping that staff do direct person-to-person fundraising or reaching out through technology or whatever that looks like for your organization. So we try not to treat boards any differently than we would treat a patron, which is, it's not a one-size-fits-all. People are on boards, you said it, people get on boards for very specific reasons, and hopefully they're asked for very specific reasons. And so the ones who are asked to say, listen, when you come on, we want you to focus on helping us directly fundraise. Can you do that? That idea, and other people saying, we want you to help us outreach and thank people, make them feel special, start to get their stories. Those are the things then that can really, really help.
You mentioned the importance of emails. And I know that within the digital marketing, the business side, they equate an active email list to basically one email equals $1 in their fiscal cycle. Within the nonprofit world, we can't really just grab and bring over statistics and expect the same type of results. But you do really understand digital, well, I would say turnkey direct mailing and turnkey emailing, and understand that. Can you kind of open that part up? When we're talking about the fundamentals here, we're talking about making a case and being able to bring out the ask. How does emails and direct marketing come into that equation?
Yeah, listen, I think they're very, very complementary, almost like what I said earlier about fundraising and a marketing department. I think for most of our clients in the arts, direct mail is still sort of the meat and potatoes. Telefunding, believe it or not, is still very, very important, and particularly with new donors, acquiring new donors. I find that e-blasts and any sort of social media hits that go out, those things can support. At least in our area, they most often support the direct mail and telefundraising. They certainly don't replace it. But yes, during the pandemic, that stood as it was a standalone when organizations were shut down and we weren't having any performances, and we weren't having exhibit openings, we weren't having classes, those sorts of things weren't happening. To be able to push the message out in a way, since everyone was stuck at home and all they had was electronic, particularly in that first year, that pushing that out, finding ways to effectively push out that message really did open up new opportunities for particularly broad-based donors. And for us, that usually means donors under $500, maybe $1,000. But for different organizations, it obviously means different things. And the way I looked at the electronic, pushing it out through electronic media, the idea is to get prospective donors to raise their hand. And that's how we utilize it to its biggest effect. It may trigger a small gift. It may trigger monthly giving. Those things are great. It doesn't often support stewardship in the same way that I'm comfortable with. So even if someone gives electronically, most often they still get some personal outreach from the organization. Even if it's a message on somebody's mobile phone, on their message, that just to say, listen, I saw you gave a gift. I'm a board member here. I think it's terrific. Thanks so much. Those tiny little moves like that, all combined, including the use of the internet, is a fantastic combination.
Oh, fantastic. That's awesome. What fundraisers in 2022 are you seeing some success in?
You mean like events or?
Yeah, events, ideas, thoughts. Somebody saying, David, I'm looking at 2022, 23. I'm thinking to myself, gosh, I need a fundraiser to plug into this area. What is working? What is not right now in society as we are looking at changing things up for our nonprofits?
Yeah, for me, it's always been consistency, and it still is. This idea of repetition. most of the institutions, again, that we're dealing with are still having trouble with audiences and museum attendance and that kind of thing. So it's not, it's increasing, but it's nowhere near pre-COVID levels. So they're leaning, rightfully so, leaning into fundraising much more to balance their budgets. Now that their operations are back up and running, and it's a higher cost to operate than it is to obviously to not operate. And so now that they've got music on stage or exhibits opened again or whatever that looks like, classes going, then the idea is we've got all these expenses rising this high, but our earned revenue is only rising this high. And so fundraising obviously has to shore it up. And so looking at what I've seen are ways then to begin to continue to source new prospective donors. Some of that's done through the internet. And again, I know I'm at an advantage because the organizations we deal with can put a lot of things on the web. They can put performances on the web. They can put lectures on the web. There's all sorts of things that maybe a health and human service organization can't necessarily do.
They're already producing content.
Yeah, at least not to the degree that a arts or cultural organization can. So I know there's a bit of an advantage there. But that idea, the successful places are consistently making sure they stay in front of patrons. And they did that from the get-go of the pandemic. Hopefully they were doing it before that, but not everybody was as much as I wish. But that's a lesson learned. So what I see trending well is thoughtful, purposeful, repetitive communication. And sometimes that's an ask for support. Sometimes that's a buy tickets. But often it's, again, collecting stories, sharing stories, building community. That's a big difference.
When I'm looking at programs that are available for me as a nonprofit director,
yeah,
I can get inundated. Like you put out a little question, try to find something. Next, you got 20 emails coming in trying to sell you. And every single one of those pitches is like, this is life or death. This will give you everything you need to become a super nonprofit, right? It's going to make you $100,000 if you just apply this. And a lot of that is noise. And suddenly it becomes harder and harder to hear what I need to do to be successful. What are some of the hot fundraising tech that you actually say, David, this is above the noise. This actually has some teeth to it. Or what is the way that we should be approaching this constant inundation of sales being thrown at us from every platform out there?
Yeah, it's a complicated answer, maybe. I think it has less to do with the emails that come in and kind of, pester you for business rather than what sort of shape your organization's in. Are you ready? Are you even ready to work with something like that? So for instance, if you don't have great messaging or you don't have great data, trying to take advantage of something that pushes some sort of interactive e-blast out isn't really going to help you because you don't currently have the fundamentals in your organization to take advantage of something like that. So that's one initial reaction. The other thing I would just say is, a friend and mentor told me this a long time ago, and it's stuck with me all these years, and I adopted it now almost as my own. This idea of fundraising doesn't dictate an organization. It doesn't dictate the success of it. It's a reflection of it. So if you have a successful organization, you can have a successful fundraising program. But if you have a really unsuccessful organization or struggling organization, it is much harder to have a successful fundraising program just because your core organizational fundamentals are either lacking or damaged or not at peak or in reverse or whatever that looks like. So I pay attention, like when these ads come through for, just buy this thing and you'll lose weight and be pretty and whatever that looks like for nonprofits. I'm very skeptical, and I think one of the first litmus tests you should put against it is, would we even be ready for something like this?
I think I bought one of those ads and I used it, and I tried to get my money back because it didn't work.
It didn't work.
I didn't lose any weight, and I'm not any prettier.
So here's what I'll tell you. and again, I'm not here to pitch my company, but I'll tell you one of the things that we did during the pandemic, because we knew nobody knew what was going on. And so when we were sending out stuff, I said, listen, we're going all virtual, just like the rest of the world. And we'll offer coaching for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months. We had packages, and we promised a money back guarantee on it. Mm-hmm. As a consultant, there aren't too many places doing that, but I knew we had to take all the risk out of it because everything was risk. Everything to our potential clients. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew when things were going to come back. So I said, listen, I'll take on the risk then. Just engage us. Let us help you. Watch it go up. Watch the fundraising go up. All I ask you to do is just do what we ask you to do. Practice what we're asking you to do. And so far, we're now almost 2 years into that offer. We haven't given any money back yet.
Because it's working.
It's working. It's not a brag. It's not. But it's a testament to what these organizations, if you can just remove some of the barriers, and if you can make sure they're willing to do what's needed to get the job done, that becomes inconsequential. A money back promise becomes inconsequential because they're going to beat it.
Yeah, I love the fact that you have provided something like that. Before we get any further in the interview, can you give us a URL, since we brought up the subject? If somebody wants to go and research a little bit more about that coaching offer for fundraising, can you throw that URL out there for them to write down?
Yeah, sure, of course. Just go to our website. It's on there. There are several free resources on there. It's rscfundraising.com. So rscfundraising.com.
And we'll make sure we have that link right below this podcast. So
Great,
you can just
thank
tap on that as well. If you're driving, listening to this, don't worry. Don't try to take a note and drive at the same time. But the note will be there when you get to your office or back home. So, all right. I got to lighten this up just a little bit. You know, there's always tricks of the trade. You know, it's always great to find a way to think through a problem when you're stop up here in your head. And what are some of the administrative tricks that you've learned and that you teach over the years that can help a fundraising opportunity really blossom? I know you just spoke about the importance of, you know, it being birthed out of a quality foundation already. But for some of us, especially with those that are first generation founders and they're growing through it, they think they've got really great quality and maybe not as much, or they're really doubting their quality, but it's really a better quality than they realize. They found their niche and they're doing it well. So no matter where they're at, what are some tricks that we can use and apply to our fundraising that can help it give the most chance of success?
Having lots of conversations would be number one for me. Just it's all about best practice. For me, it's never a trick or a gimmick, because what I like to say, David, is that if it takes a gimmick to get a donor, it's going to take a gimmick to keep them, and that's just exhausting. I don't want to do that. So,
that's a great point.
So the kinds of things that we think about is communicate purposely and frequently with your prospects and donors. So give them, and I don't mean it in such a way like drinking from the fire hose kind of freak. We're not trying to overwhelm donors and prospects with information. We want them to see things that might interest them, or that demonstrates the value that the institution has to the community, how it aligns with the community, maybe what people are involved that makes it even more meaningful. Some people like statistics, other people like stories. So I talk a lot about the facts and then the facts and figures and feelings are sort of the three areas that when you're building a case you want to focus on. So having, you know, the facts and figures and feelings. So that way when you're talking to someone, you can gravitate towards what interests them. And so if you're publishing things, don't always make it about just all the stuff you're doing. Sometimes it'll have to be about the numbers. Sometimes it'll have to be about storytelling. And so through that sort of repetition and cycling, it has the best chance of appealing to the widest variety of prospective donors. And so that's a discipline that we coach quite a bit. Then the big one, and this is so hard, and it's hard for me as a coach even, but just listening. So asking open-ended questions when you're talking to prospective donors and listening. So it really is about relationship building. And I know that that's an old, tired term, almost as tired as if you want money, ask for advice, and if you want advice, ask for money. But I've come to believe that over the years. I've witnessed it over and over again. So have those fundamentals that we talked about earlier. You have to have good people. You have to have good data. You have to have good technology. You have to have a great message. And then you have to have this system of repetition over and over. And so that's the thing that I see as the big game changer. If we can get leadership, messaging, and consistency and solicitation and stewardship, that's what's going to be a game changer for most organizations.
One of the hot subjects that is floating a lot in the nonprofit world right now is digital marketing for nonprofits. And there's a lot of noise being made about digital marketing. Where does it fit in a nonprofit's fundraising strategy?
Yeah, I think it's similar. If you've got a great story, you can push that story out. You can also invite others to participate in the story. For organizations that do events, so even hopefully fun events, even if they're doing runs, golf outings, volunteer days, the kinds of things that bring people a step closer to the institution, I find are the most successful. I find that to be more successful than trying to do repetitive direct asking online. So to me, finding the way to get people interested and involved is not that I'm shy about asking early and often, but I want the conditions to be as good as I can get them, as quickly as I can get them. And technology offers us an avenue for that. And so even in some ways, I've seen, we're starting to see, what's the word I'm looking for? Subscriptions that you can sign up for into organizations that automatically help thank your donors online. And so for a small shop and a busy shop, it's not, these things aren't free. They do come with a price, but so does not stewarding your donors. So this idea, right? So this idea of saying, if there are things that we can automate like that, be it in communication or asking or thanking or stewarding, it's worth looking at technology and that usage.
Absolutely. So we get to the part of our conversation where I like to ask this next one. This is the mic drop question. This is the, where you got a room full of people in your podcast TED Talk, and you say something, everyone gasps, you drop the mic, and you walk off the TED Talk. Or I don't want you to hang up from this conversation, though. Don't get me wrong. But I want to just ask you, if I handed you the mic right now, and by the way, you're in the podcast room.
Here we are.
But if I handed you the mic right now, what would you leave everybody thinking as you head back to your business?
If I had just one line to give people, it would be what I said before: err on the side of asking. That's what I would leave, because when you ask, you get usually one of three responses: yes, no, or maybe. And any of those responses we can work with. Even a no, we can work with. And so this idea of saying, waiting for the perfect moment to craft the perfect message and get the perfect group of volunteers and the perfect timing, and find when it doesn't interfere with other things that you're doing, and all, and all the angels come together and saying it's not right. That doesn't exist. And so that's why we say, if you're ever in doubt, ask for support. If you're in doubt about where a relationship stands, if you don't know if now's the right time or not, but you've done a lot of steps, I say ask for support, and it'll make it very distinctive. Now, if you go too far with that statement, it can be dangerous. So I'm going to qualify it. But in essence, that's what I say. It's where most organizations are the weakest. They can do lots of other things well, but just getting over that cliff of saying it's time to go ask this person for support can sometimes be the hardest psychological thing to get by.
Very good. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, Bob.
Like it. Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. I have one thing that we do at the end of every single episode, and I look forward to this every time. We do a shout out to a nonprofit that is doing a great job. And we really like to brag on the ones that are doing well. And too bad we can't do it one after another after another. But we pick one, and then I hand it to you, and you get to pick one that you really think is doing a great job as well. Are you ready?
Of course, yeah. I can't wait. Tell me yours.
Thank you. All right. So today I really want to do a shout out to a nonprofit called To Write Love in Her Arms. To Write Love in Her Arms is a nonprofit movement dedicated to presenting hope and finding help for people struggling with depression, addiction, self-injury, and suicide. They exist to encourage, inform, inspire, and also to invest directly into treatment and recovery. And when I say directly, they get you there and they help investing right into the answer, the solution of the problem. To share a message of hope and help is really their heart's cry and their mission as an organization. They also help find the right tools and provide the right funding to treatment and recovery efforts. Now, the reason why I bring them to your attention, because there are many out there that try to accomplish this, and especially the big national ones. But To Write Love in Her Arms is an organization that isn't gigantic. They have limited resources, but they use them incredibly well. Their charity score is 90.22, earning a 4-star rating out of 4 stars. So they are right there near the 4-star plus rating, and donors can give with confidence to this charities. And the rate they're given by a number of organizations that look at charities as far as their transparency, their ability to accomplish their mission, to do what their donors give them money to do, they actually accomplish it. They get an exceptional. Now, exceptional is not easy to get and to hold. And so I'm really proud of what they're doing and the leadership there at To Write Love in Her Arms. This score that I gave is not just one based on a person's look at them or an organization looking at them. It's also coming from IRS records. It's coming from other things. Their accountability and transparency, according to outside non-biased data, is 100%. They're an honest organization. And for this, I want to give them my shout out today. Great job, leaders there at To Write Love on Her Arms. Keep doing a great job. We need more organizations like yours. Bob, it's your turn. Who would you like to give a shout out to?
Well, I'm going to love on one of our longtime clients just because it's been a long story for us too for the last 7 years, and that's the Sacramento Philharmonic and Opera. And I don't know what their score is, but I know what their score is with me, and it's excellent. It's really fantastic. In 2013 they merged. They were separate organizations, so you had the Philharmonic, you had the Opera. They merged, and they quickly ran out of money in the season, and for several months couldn't perform, couldn't mount a performance, couldn't afford a performance. And so they, less than a year after forming, all the music stopped, and they were insolvent by all practical measures. And so, including me, a team and I went to help them at all levels: fundraising, marketing, PR, and executive leadership, board development, the whole thing. What we were able to do early was move their annual fundraising, for instance. They didn't have an endowment. Their annual fundraising from about $400,000 a year to $1 million. And that plus what they were able to do in ticket sales and earned revenue was phenomenal, just in terms of getting them back up to an operational budget and to be able to put music back on the stage. That $1 million now has grown incrementally over the last 5 or 6 years. They're looking at 1.2, maybe 1.3 million in annual fundraising and recurring, which is great for them, but their earned revenues also come up. So fundamentally, that's the reason I'm giving them the shout out, not just because the numbers are good, but the artistic standard is fantastic there. The orchestra sounds great. The opera offerings they give are great. The community wants it. So there's relevance there. There's value there. And there's this great relationship between the community and the Phil Opera that really didn't exist prior to this venture. So to be able to see them not just make their numbers and not just make their hall counts, have audiences, but to become an essential part of their community with high value for not just a very small percentage, but the community at large. That's why I'm giving them a shout out today. I'm really proud of them. I'm proud of what they've done in fundraising. I'm proud of what they've done as an organization. So they're my group today.
That is a phenomenal shout out. I encourage everyone to go check them out. And especially if you're going to be in the region where they're performing, go give them a listen. I'm sure you will enjoy it. I love the arts and just feel my soul growing every time I get to be in a position where I'm hearing the beauty of it being expressed. Robert, it's been so good to have you as a part of our conversation today.
Great. Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate it. It was fun, just like you promised. Thank you.
Excellent. As you're listening, I want you to go look at Robert Swaney Consulting, their website. I went ahead and, as I said earlier, their contact information is going to be in the notes on this show. You can go there, as well as if you're connected to us on social media, you'll see links to them on all of our social media platforms. The thing that I really want to impress with you, though, is as I went through their website, it is a full body website, an amazing team, a great team of excellent professionals, and you get to read all about who they are and their background as well. So if you're looking for advice, if you're looking for a consulting company that is really knows what they're doing, and they've got really good understanding of the current situation of nonprofits today, this is one that you can go and investigate. Have a look at them, see what they have, see what free materials are available for you, as well as ones that you can get with 100% guarantee return. I want to say this very carefully. I am not at all being paid. This show has nothing to do with them as a business advertising venture. We just have a lot of respect for them. And so with that, we encourage you to check them out if you have need for that. It's been great having you a part of this conversation. Bob, it's been great having you come talk to us more about what you are doing and some great advice. I think some excellent notes to be taken from this conversation. And for all of you that have been listening, thank you for what you do. We need you. You are an important part of our communities, and you're the one that brings the smile and the hope in the hearts of each neighborhood. Keep doing what you're doing. Until we speak again in another few days, bye now.